So to fix bloating, you really need to understand what's causing that bloating for you, and that can really be different from person to person. But the timing of that bloating, like when it happens according to a meal, along with the location of that bloating, can give you some insights that might help you figure out what's going on and the right steps that are going to help you. Let's jump in.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So it was over on our video for Why Am I So Bloated that user RealZay something or other asked, hello, what could constant bloating in the lower abdomen signify? So if we're going to look at where bloating is happening and what does that really mean for us, we really need to understand the most common causes of bloating. And it really can be different from person to person. You know, there's things like an inability to process dietary fats that can cause bloating. But the more common causes are someone having a lack of stomach acid, where they're not making enough stomach acid to truly acidify that food so that it can break down appropriately. And when that food can't be acidified and broken down, it has to break down by process of rotting and fermenting. And that rotting and fermenting creates a lot more gases, which can create more pressure, and then that pressure can create that bloating. And then bloating is also very commonly occurring because of some type of bacterial overgrowth, either in the stomach or the small intestine. And those bacteria also put off a lot of waste, and they also create gases which can create pressure and then create that bloating as well. And it's interesting that a lot of people are actually dealing with bloating, especially when it's chronic bloating or they're bloating all the time or severely. They're dealing with multiple causes of that bloating, and there's multiple digestive malfunctions going on. And a lot of times when there's a bacterial overgrowth, either in the stomach or the small intestine, or even a dysbiosis issue in our large intestine or our gut, like all the cool kids call it, when that issue is there, those bad guys got in because there wasn't enough stomach acid to close the front door. That stomach acid doesn't just help us acidify the food so that it can break down correctly. It kills all the bad guys when they come in on the food that we're eating. They're supposed to die in an acid bath. So if someone has some type of bacterial overgrowth, it's usually because there's not enough stomach acid there to fry them on the way in the front door. And there's a lot of reasons that someone might not be making enough stomach acid. They don't need to be taking some medication that turns off stomach acid or using antacids or something that can neutralize those acids. There's a variety of reasons that someone would not be making enough stomach acid, and that's very common. We have a lot of videos that go over that. But here we're going to talk about where that discomfort is coming from and what that might tell us. And this can be a little bit tricky. I don't want you to view this as diagnostic in any way, because a lot of pain and discomfort in this midsection area can kind of radiate, and it can kind of be coming from somewhere else, even though it feels like, oh, I'm having pains and cramps here. You know, like if someone's having like a gallbladder attack or kidney stones or sometimes it can be hard to tell exactly where that's coming from. So when you look at the pain in that area in a more severe case like that, you can see that even lesser pains can be confusing as far as where it's coming from. But even more confusion can come from the fact that like this all like kind of twists around and overlaps each other, and then like the large intestine comes back up on the top, you know, like it's just, there's a lot of things that confuse where that discomfort can be coming from. But let's look at some things that can give us some ideas of what may be going on so we can figure out which steps are going to be more appropriate for us. So if someone's bloating rather quickly, maybe within 30 to 60 minutes of eating their food, that's usually a sign that that bloating is occurring in the stomach. So that food is still in the stomach at that point. And if there's bloating there, then that would indicate that there's probably a lack of stomach acid there that's creating that bloating, or that there's a bacterial overgrowth in the stomach. You know, like H. pylori is very popular. All the cool kids have H. pylori. And that happens a lot in the stomach. So if there's bacteria there where they really shouldn't be in a high volume like that, that can create a lot of bloating. But also that lack of stomach acid could also create bloating in that stomach. And what's interesting is that the timing could be a confusing factor as well, because if someone gets bloated right away, it's obvious that there's probably some bacteria in the stomach. But if that bloating is coming later, you would think that it would be down here in the small intestine where, it takes longer for action to get to, where that small intestine is. And it's very common to see a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO, like they call it now. And that's happening in the small intestine. And usually, if someone has a bacterial overgrowth in the stomach, even if it's H. pylori or something like that, it kind of sets up the environment for other bad guys to come in and set up camp. Because a lot of these bacteria have an alkaline waste that they put out, and then that further alkalizes the stomach, both restricting the person's ability to acidify the food and break it down correctly, but also making that environment more hospitable for the bad guys and for more bad guys to come in. And when there's an overgrowth there in the stomach, it's almost always going to make its way down to the small intestine as well. But what can be confusing about the timing is that, if a person really doesn't have any stomach acid, it might take a couple of hours for that food to really start rotting and fermenting and creating all those gases and the pressure that can really create that bloating. So the food might still be sitting in the stomach. We hear from a lot of people who experience delayed gastric emptying is what it's called. And this happens because there's a lack of stomach acid. The food is supposed to move out after it's been acidified. So if there's a delay there, then there's usually not enough stomach acid to get it acidified correctly. And if that's the case, that delay can also mean that the bloating might show up later as well. So that's a couple of factors that you really want to keep an eye on. Now, if bloating is low in the abdomen and it's kind of there all the time, like Dr. Zay, or that wasn't it, it was something Zay, right, was asking in this question, then that's usually a pretty slam dunk that it's a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. That's usually the discomfort that's going to happen lower in the abdomen, just because that's where most of our small intestine lies. It kind of goes down that lower side. And if it's there all the time, then that's usually from an overgrowth. It's not really varying depending on what the person is eating. It's just kind of, I'm always bloated. I'm not even pregnant. Why do I look pregnant? All those kind of feelings that we have. It's usually all that bacteria that's putting off all that waste. It's creating all those gases and pressure, and that's just kind of expanding everything and creating all the bloating. It can create cramping and just all of that discomfort that can go along with it. But we also want to think about the fact that different foods can also cause bloating at different times. Like, legumes, like beans and such, they just digest differently than most foods. And they do a lot of their digestive process further down the line in the small intestine, kind of. And so that can create a delay in when that would create bloating. And for a lot of people, like if they're eating a lot of carbohydrates, if that causes bloating a lot faster, then there's probably bacteria in the stomach and the carbohydrates are kind of activating that bacteria. A lot of carbs and sugars will kind of activate bacteria in a lot of cases. So if the carbs and sugars are going right in, like, man, I'm bloated right away, then that's more likely that there's an overgrowth in the stomach that really needs to be taken care of. And then the person is probably going to have to restore their stomach acid function in order to shut the front door so more bad guys are not coming in. And if you don't know how to do all these things, if you're new to this channel, my book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, chapters 3 and 4, kind of walk you through figuring out which aspects of digestion are not working correctly and steps you can take to improve those. And the book is available on Amazon, but I'll put a link in the description below, and you can get the whole thing totally for free, and then you can just jump to chapters 3 and 4. And that also explains that bile flow issue and why bile can become too thick and sticky to flow correctly. And if it's not flowing correctly, we can't emulsify or break down our dietary fats. And then consuming dietary fats can create a lot of symptoms, and one of those is possibly bloating. And then we talked a little bit about protein. If a person doesn't have enough stomach acid to really break that protein down, then that discomfort could come later because it takes longer for that protein to break down by process of rotting and fermenting. And then that rotting and fermenting can create those extra gases and toxins and junk like that can create bloating a little bit later for some people. And we also need to think if that intestinal tract is really alkaline from like no stomach acid and all alkaline waste from all this bacteria, then that can cause things to move through at a slower pace. So if it's really alkaline, it could be moving really slow, and you could be having a discomfort from something you ate like 6 hours ago. So you can see it's really hard to pinpoint almost anything that's really going on in the stomach. But if some of these things are really clear for you, it's always low. It's always all the time. That gives a really strong indication that it's probably more of a SIBO situation. And, carbs make me bloat right away. Well, that's a sign that there's a bacterial overgrowth in the stomach. So you can look at some of these things to kind of get an idea of what's most likely going on. And when you're looking at, bringing down a bacterial overgrowth, there are some steps that seem to be more targeted for the stomach and some that are more targeted for the small intestine. So there are a variety of issues they can do, but we usually like to take a variety of steps with our clients. We don't just do one thing. We like to take a variety of steps. And a lot of those steps can be beneficial for both the stomach and the small intestine and even further down in that intestinal tract in the gut as well. And then once a person has wiped out enough bad guys and they've restored any digestive malfunctions, then they could do some prebiotics to kind of reestablish a good gut flora. But when you're taking steps to initially wipe out some bad guys, we like to use a variety of steps, and some of those steps can benefit both the stomach and the small intestine. So if you want to understand some of those steps, you can jump over right now and check out our video on steps to wipe out the bad bacteria in the stomach and such. I hope that helps.